suspected. What I didn't know for years, what was investigation in Tower 7 had no physical evidence. How do you investigate a crime? Doesn't make sense.
And Bill Rosati, he was here when it all happened. He saw it for himself. Bill, if you can just tell us what you saw, what you heard.
I was standing like 2 blocks away, and all of a sudden I just seen a big flash, and then I seen the building coming down, and I just seen people just running everywhere, chaotic like.
So I was just standing there, you know, we were watching the building actually because it was on standing there. We heard this sound that sounded were on fire, and you know, we heard this sound that sounded like a clap of thunder. Turned around the building, and the windows all busted out. And you know, it was horrifying. And then you know, about a second later, the bottom floor caves out, and the plume.
There, just so you can see it, is what we call the kind of the Fire Investigation 101. This is the most basic fire investigation manual there. This is for the 2001 edition. This is what should have been referred to, at least. It doesn't have to be followed exactly, but it should have been used as a guideline for the investigation. I'm just going to cover a few of the things that are in here. So NIST violated, and the initial investigators that did not protect the 19.2.4. Even the slightest use of an accelerant, we're going to test for it when there's no fatalities, when there's very little property damage. So to not do it on this, there is absolutely no excuse. I can't drive that point home enough. 18.15 is analyze fuel source. All available fuel sources should be considered and eliminated until one fuel can be identified as meeting all of the physical damage criteria. For example, if you find pulverized concrete, which we all know there was in all 3 buildings, there was pulverized concrete, the only fuels that can create seeded explosions should be considered. So they shouldn't be considering fires. They shouldn't be doing that. It doesn't account for pulverized concrete. They should only be considering exotic accelerants and explosives. 19.4.8.2.6, extremism. The terrorist may include fire as but one of a variety of weapons along with explosives used in furthering his or her goal. We know they used them in 93. Why would we not know they used them in 93? Why would we not test for them now? There was reports that day, multiple reports, which I'll get into here in a second. So they could have put them in the basement. How do we know that unless we test for it? I mean, even if it is the terrorists that they claim they are, we need to test this. 14.3, preservation of the fire scene and physical evidence. We find the following. The cause of a fire explosion is not known until near the end of the investigation. The entire fire scene should be considered physical evidence and should be protected and preserved. It's just over and over. There's so many. You can go to our website, the Firefighters for Nano-Truth. We have many more of these actual chapters that cover what they should have done that they did not do. So now, by their own admission, in all 3 building collapses, NIST refused to physically test, like Dr. Stephen Jones did, for explosives. This is just unbelievable. And here are their excuses, and I quote, "It is unlikely that 100 pounds of thermite or more could have been carried into World Trade Center 7 and placed around columns without being detected, either prior to September 11th or during that day." So again, I've been on a lot of fire scenes, and I've seen a lot of investigations, and why would we not test because something's hard to do? That's the exact reason you need to investigate it. If that was hard to do, we need to find out how they did it. And number 2, NIST excuse. In addition, no blast sounds were heard on the audio tracks of the video recordings during the collapse of World Trade Center 7 or reported by witnesses. That's one of the excuses why they didn't test. Well, apparently they didn't read Chapter 18. 18 is the general definition of explosions. Although an explosion is almost always accompanied by the production of a loud noise, the noise itself is not, in big bold letters, an essential element in the definition of an explosion. The generation and violent escape of gases are the primary criteria of an explosion. So that alone says they should have tested for it. But then we also, NIST has lied, and we can prove it. As soon as the new investigation happens, the evidence is out there for you to see right now. We have 118 first responders who reported explosions. We have the radio transmissions from FDNY members that are still recorded today that reported explosions. We have audio recordings. We have video recordings. I've personally talked to witnesses that heard them. So there's nothing short of saying they lied, and they need to be held accountable. And besides that, like I said, there is no excuse for not testing for explosives. And so at the very least, at the very best, even if you want to believe the official story, this was the most incompetent investigation of all time. And I've talked to a lot of investigators that were there, and I asked them the specific question, why did they refuse to test? They weren't the ones who refused, but NIST did. And they said, all we can say, all they can answer is incompetence, or they tell me to shut up. They cannot give me any reason that follows national standards. So, but the reality, after all the research everybody here and the incredible people we're in the room with today have done, the reality is it was a criminal investigation to cover up the crime. So, I'd like, just to finish, I'd like to read a quote. This is from a retired, decorated FDNY lieutenant. Anyone who knows the fire service, he is a stud. He worked on Ladder Company 26, Rescue Company 3, Rescue Company 1 in his career. Anyone who knows, those are amazing companies. Here's his comment. Trade Tower 7 by itself is the smoking gun. Not hit by an aircraft with only a few relatively small fires, it came down in a classic crimp and implosion, going straight into its basement. Something only very precise demolitions can accomplish, which takes days, if not weeks, to prepare. The 9/11 Commission didn't even mention it, and FEMA actually stated they didn't know why it collapsed and left it at that. Brothers, I know that the above implications are hard, almost unthinkable, but the official explanation is utter nonsense, and 343 of our murdered brothers are crying out for justice. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Of interest that we'd find would be some of the parts of the plane embedded in the cars and in places in which you just wouldn't expect. A part of the fins off the turbine off of one of the engines was actually found embedded into one of the engine blocks of one of the cars. But I think the most unique thing about this investigation has just been the unbelievable damage, the levels of heat in which, in certain instances, firearms were found in some of the vehicles that had completely melted down, and the temperatures that we were told were in the area of 3,000 to 4,000 degrees, that they melted a steel revolver down into a blob of metal again. These were some of the things. An engine block that was aluminum, and its pistons were cast iron, and other parts of the engine were steel, and the aluminum had actually melted around the steel and the iron and had dripped off like teardrops coming from the parts of the car. Fronts of automobiles that just melted away from the extreme heat, and yet the rest of the automobile was otherwise intact. And these steel automobiles that give people such belief in being secure and well made while they're driving 70 miles an hour on a highway are found to be little piles of tin cans after they've been struck by the immensity of this attack.